Ever since I loaded Italo Calvino's book on a really long flight from Tokyo to Melbourne, I just got lost in his originality, in the blurry real and fiction part of his storytelling, the way that he creates topics like the invisible cities that I'm just inherently drawn to. And it got me thinking a lot about how to think originally. How come his writing and a lot of great authors' writing aren't, the regurgitated AI lists with emojis everywhere. And he says something so profound that still lingers in my mind, that the only type of literature possible today is a literature that is critical and creative. For so many of us who are knowledge workers, who work with this intangible knowledge, especially in the corporate setting, a lot of us feel like being critical and being creative are at two ends of the spectrum, right? Whenever we are putting our analytical hat on, there is no space to be creative. In fact, that's almost frowned upon, like, oh, creativity, like, that's for the designers, right? That's for the artists struggling out there. I am being paid for my analytical superpowers. But actually, if you think about it, the best knowledge workers, the people who continue to move up, those who do meaningful work are the ones who can be analytical, critical, but at the same time be creative. The fact that you see problems that exist, that things aren't the way they should be, naturally it invites us to be creative. It's almost that cliche that Nobel Prize winning scientists always have some sort of instruments that they play, like Einstein played violin, and all these people have a theatrical interest and musical interest. They love to paint, they love to write. And the two come hand in hand. This is what separates doers from leaders, AI from humans, even AI to AI, right? At the beginning, it doesn't matter which model you use, right? They all got to somewhat of a similar answer. But now you see ChatGPT taking a stance, you see Claude taking a stance, you see Gemini taking a stance, because we all need our point of view. When we went through school, when we went through training at work, groupthink is safe, right? We don't want to be the one that's left out, that's thought differently from everyone else. But there is a price to safety. There always is a price to safety. In this case, it is being replaceable, right? If you agreed with whatever everyone else saying, why do we need to include you in the conversation? And being replaceable at work, especially with all this layoff things continuing to happen, it should shake us to realize that the core skill we have to develop, especially with AI being able to regurgitate all the wonderful wisdom that we've built over time, is that we need to have our point of view, not just be an input machine that can regurgitate, but also to say, okay, these are all the things I know, so what? What is my point of view on this? What is my critical and creative answer to this? Frameworks and mental models are great at this, a place to start where it combines all of the things that we know and it says, hey, here are the 3 things that you have to focus on in order to get the outcome you want. But how many people feel like, okay, I've studied these mental models, I've studied these frameworks, but when do I use what? That is about how to think originally, because you can apply multiple things to the same problem, but which one do you choose? Where do you think the key is? And that is a more creative process, one that requires a point of view, because otherwise, they all fit. So which one do we use? This also leads to creating your own frameworks, right? Some people are like, oh, hey, Vicky, where did you get all your frameworks from? Yeah, some of them I got from consulting. They work great. But some of them is just based on my experience working in different companies, working with different people, working on specific problems that I know the existing frameworks don't work. So I create my own. And you can only create it if you have a point of view. You know how to define the problem so that you can define the solution to answer that problem. So as we all get better at what we do and we move up the ladder, whichever ladder it is that we're on, what is our point of view? Can we cultivate it? Can we think originally and not just repeat what everyone else is saying? Is going to help us build our leadership, our thought leadership. And as the book 101 Things I Learned from Product Design School says, Originality doesn't begin with originality. It starts with the basic competencies. I'll share with you 4 basic competencies I have picked up throughout life so that it helps me remove myself from groupthink and start building my point of view. Number 1 is identifying and articulating original work that you like. This is harder than it seems because whenever we try to read something, right, we reach for the New York Times bestseller. We go to the bookstore and we look for the recommendations that is given to us by others. We're looking to outsource our ability to evaluate what we should be consuming. But I'm sure you have those moments where everyone is raving about something, you check it out, you're like, this is okay, I guess. For me, it's Ed Sheeran. I think his music is fine. If there are Ed Sheeran fans here, no shade thrown on him. It's just that it doesn't resonate with me as much as it does with his fanatic fans. So when that happens, I ask myself, can I articulate what is it about, let's say Ed Sheeran, that others like, and what is it that I prefer instead? I'm trying to figure out, who am I? Like, what are my interests? What are my strengths? Do I gravitate towards? And that will start to give me hints as to what original means to me. For Ed Sheeran, his songs are really catchy. His lyrics are really visual, and I think those are all wonderful things. But to me, I like syncopated beats. I like beats that are off or beats that are on the weaker ones. And to me, I always remember Ed Sheeran songs mostly as very easy to bob your head to and doesn't catch me off guard. Okay, so I realize I am interested in usually what's missed in the mainstream. I'm usually interested in the things that seem like supporting actors, but I actually want to look at them as the main character. So then follow that thread and look for that characteristic you like about your favorite thinker, author, whatever it is, painters, musicians. For me, one of the books that really left a strong impression on me is this Japanese book called Hotel Cactus. It's by Ekuni, Kaori. And it's a strange story about a hat, the number 2, and a cucumber, and they're all friends. They live in this stone apartment that's misnamed as a hotel. And the story is just about their everyday life, their friendship, and how they're all very unique in the things that make them smile, the things that makes them sad. Their daily routine is all different, and yet they are friends and they go through life's up and down. It's a classic Japanese sensibility in the book where it doesn't have big bams. It's not like, bam, there's something terrible that happened, and then bam, it got so much worse, and then, oh, we're building up to the climax, bam, again. Like, everything is very dramatic. This book is so calm, nostalgic, and yet it leaves this soft yet deep sting in you as you read it. And the story itself deepened how I saw the world. Like, now when I go to a supermarket, I can't look at cucumbers the same way. And it reminds me of the cucumber in the book who loves to work out and has a whole personality and routine. And so, I look at the onion next to the cucumber, and that I can't help but think, who is the onion? Maybe it's the couch potato, but wait a second, like, that's the potato. So who is the onion? Well, it's got layers, so maybe it's the philosophical thinking type. But that seems a bit cliche, so maybe the onion is actually, someone like me who's got random experiences put together. They try to present themselves as one person, but if you cut them up, they make you tear up. But I'm like, I don't make other people tear up, so I don't know. But anyway, you get the idea. The second you gravitate towards something, your mind can't help but create its own version, right? And that is what's important, being able to become self-aware of those moments and to lean into that. What's original is not about the concept, right? You don't have to come up with a completely new concept that no one has ever heard of, like identity and having multiple perspectives within yourself. Also, the idea of the onion representing a person with lots of layers, not new. right? Lots of people probably have thought about that or wrote about that. But what is original is your decision to bring those two together and where you put the emphasis. Right? For me, I'll probably put it around the idea that if you grew up with multiple cultures at home or as throughout life, that you feel, even though I'm Canadian, I feel like I am also Chinese, I'm also Japanese, I'm also Korean, I'm also French, I'm also Australian in certain sense because of all the places that I've lived, I've spent time in, and their quirks and characteristics I've picked up. And it feels so painful to say that out loud in those places because for a lot of people, identity is based on your passport or where you're born. And in France, I would have never gotten anyone who said, oh, but where are you really from? And so it's how you put those things together that contribute to the originality of your ideas. They don't have to be brand new, right? But it is where you put the emphasis and how you describe it that resonate with some people and not others, and that's okay. And how do you make sure you track these moments of crossover between ideas? It is from taking notes. It's a basic competency, especially if you have been an A student throughout your entire life. But I think we've been doing it all wrong at school, right? At school, we're looking for the key points. We're not looking for the points that resonate with us. We're trying to regurgitate whatever is there to get the perfect definition right on that test. But in reality, it is how do you rephrase that idea? What does that idea mean to you? And how do you connect that idea with something else? If you've been on my channel, you know I take Zettelkasten notes with Obsidian. And the idea is you want to make atomic notes, write them in your own words, and then connect them to other ideas that you have or other people have that you have reworded for yourself, that you've deemed them important enough to write them down, recreate them, and connect them with others. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can check out this video here. I have lots of videos on Zettelkasten and Obsidian note-taking. But the key idea here is that it's not just about the inputs, the original works that you're consuming, but also about how you process them. It's like you see, oh, beautiful flowers, this beautiful branch, these beautiful herbs, and I want to cut them all off. And because I want a beautiful garden that has all of these elements, I threw all the things that I've cut off and chucked them in my backyard, expecting that naturally my backyard will grow into this luscious forest with all these beautiful flowers. Of course they don't, right? The flowers wither and the branches dry up because we don't tend to them. And the work of tending to the flowers, letting them grow roots from the cutting and being able to water them over time is a process of note-taking, right? Of being able to connect your ideas together. So you build that lattice work and know why they fit into your ideaverse. We're all really good at collecting things, but what do we do with them, right? There needs to be a second step before we can expect them to grow into something. That's why when you read books and you close it, when you're reading, you feel like, wow, like this is amazing. This insight, it was so beautifully said. And then you close the book, everything just dissipates into nothingness, right? It's like, what was that really good point again? Like, I swear I remembered it when I was reading it, but the second I close it, it's attached to nothing and it disappeared. I got so frustrated with myself that there would be these good ideas that pop up and I could never capture them and they just dissipate. And so having a note-taking system in order to capture those and be able to come back to them and continuously process them and build on them has really changed my intellectual life. I cannot underline this more. So check out those videos if you haven't. And if you take notes, share it down below so others can see how rich your collection of ideas can be when you actually put them somewhere. And when you prioritize your ideas, this will lead me to the third competency, is you will start to realize how important it is to journal, especially in the morning. I used to scroll my phone the second I wake up. What are the emails that are coming in? What do people need me for? I need to prepare for my day, so I got to see, what are the fires I need to put out? And then I put out the fires for the rest of the day, and the day ends, and I feel like I was so busy, but how come I didn't achieve anything? The projects I need to do still feel like there is no progress. Putting my mind through all that task switching made me unable to focus, so I would sit down, even when I blocked out time for deep work, but I was confused. I was like, what should I work on? Because I can't even prioritize my own things because I'm thinking about, Sally needs me for this in a couple of hours. Bob was asking about that, and I wonder how I can serve all these other people's needs, and forget somehow that there are things that I want to prioritize. Now, luckily, I did have a journaling habit at the end of the day. And after a while, I realized I had nothing to say. I had no new ideas. I just complained in my journal about everything that's going on and feeling confused. So what I did was I switched the order. I put journaling the first thing in the morning after I wake up. And when I put pen to paper, especially after a good sleep, or even when I had dreams, I could access thoughts that weren't cluttered by all this junk that other people were throwing at me. Even my dreams became generative. And I remember I had this dream about me being in London, and a pharaoh asked me to deliver some secret documents in Paris to his attaché. And from there, actually, this secret Asian-like experience inspired one of the first pieces of fiction I've ever written. I would have never even remembered the dream if I just opened my email right away, or got distracted by whoever's DMing me on Instagram. I realized there were two things I had to learn how to do. Again, these are basic competencies. Number one is just be able to sit with my thoughts. Sounds easy, right? We all have thoughts, but can you tell me what are the key thoughts that swim in your head these days? Most of us can't say, right? It's just muddled because what we have trained ourselves, especially at work, is there are 1,000 things I need to do, and so I just do whatever comes to mind, finish it, and move on. And when we move on, usually we're not intentionally building anything. I talked about, building sandcastles at work here. And the idea that there is no intentionality behind what we're doing, and we don't know where we're headed, yet we're always so busy, means that we're not accessing any deep thoughts that we want to make progress on. The second basic competency is self-expression. Again, seems really simple, right? Every time we talk, aren't we self-expressing? But most of the time we're not. We are self-censoring so that we can fit into groupthink. I mean, how many times was I not honest and said something that I cringed on the inside, but I knew it would be the socially acceptable thing to do? Now, I'm not saying, you should just not have any EQ and destroy all social relationships around you. Yes, there is a time for that, of course, but is there a place in your life where you can self-express? Are there ideas that you have that are true to who you are, rather than, I think they want to hear this, so I'm going to describe everything in the way I think they want to hear? And this gap between who we are and who we want others to see us to be is usually the cause of our internal turmoils and all of the insecurities, because we are, again, not willing to self-express and worry that what if I actually do say what I think and everyone thinks I'm stupid or they don't agree with my opinions. So having a space somewhere where you can self-express, like in journaling, is a great start. And that leads me to the fourth basic competency that I think every one of us should try. It's a bit controversial, it's a bit out there, but stay with me. I think we should all write fiction. I know it sounds crazy. I also felt the same when, there's a twinkle of interest in me to write fiction because I love reading fiction. But I didn't know where to start, where do these characters come from? Where does the plot come from? Do I need to know the end in order to start writing at the beginning? Do I even write from the beginning? Like how do I create this world? How do I give personality to these characters? And I got so overwhelmed until two things. Number one, my sister-in-law mentioned she actually does a lot of picture books, and she was saying, a typical picture book has 32 pages. And you have to fit the story into 32 pages. That's not a lot, right? And especially when in children's books, there are plenty of pages that are just playing with a drawing. Each page has maybe a couple of sentences. So you're looking at around 32 pages, and that's a fiction. That's a story that you can tell. And all of a sudden, that removed all the nervousness of all this world building that I thought I had to do. That's number one. And number two is one of my writer friends, Silvio. He used to write these essays about what is the reality, but then he switched to fiction, and his fiction was just so mesmerizing. And it actually reminds me of Italo Calvino now that I think about it. And he mentioned to me something that just rings in my head, which is that you can't argue with fiction. Everyone has their opinions if you write publicly, right? Oh, this is wrong. Here, let me poke holes somewhere else. Oh, people twist your words, misinterpret what you're saying. And instead of worrying about that when writing, which usually removes ourselves from our original ideas because we want to protect ourselves and, fit in so we don't get attacked. Fiction is fiction. It is a fictional story, and anything can happen, and you cannot argue with it. You don't need to defend anything, right? Whatever it is that you write, it's an invitation for others to interpret it however they like. And if you want to explore your ideas in a safe environment, give this a try. Even you don't start today, keep this in the back of your mind, because I recently wrote my first piece of fiction, and it's about my experience being an outsider. Going back to that onion example, even though I was in Japan, I felt a part of me was Japanese, but I mentioned this to a Japanese friend, and they were like, oh, really? Like, which part? And they just found it so unthinkable that a person who is not Japanese can feel a part of the culture within them. Like, it's just a strange idea. And so I have plenty of stories like these, and I wanted to write about it, but I didn't want to write about it from a first person, here's what I experienced. And so putting it through fiction was so liberating, and it showed me the points of emphasis that I didn't even know I had because I was afraid to put them on paper and call people out in the process. Having a pseudonym is another great way to think about it. Writing a children's book, thinking about that lesson that you want to embed in the story also helps shape, hey, what is it that I'm trying to say here? What is that idea that I have? As you can see, I'm getting worked up. This topic is so dear to me, even though it is a scary pursuit to have your own point of view, to, even fathom that you can come up with something original, but it is such a worthwhile and satisfying process along the way that opens a lot of doors to learning, to experimenting. And I'm already having thoughts about what the next piece of fiction I'm going to write. If you're curious about what I wrote, I'll link it down below. If you have things that you are writing, please let me know. I would love to read them. And yeah, I think creativity is a proxy for intelligence. I actually wrote about this topic as well. So more to come on building your point of view, building that thought leadership. If you are curious about more of these ideas, check out this video here, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.